sunshine and lollipops, saying you just couldn't make it at the end of 6 months. What happens to you? What do you lose?
Well, check this out. What he says, we always have a pessimist in the group. Roger says, what if everything is not sunshine and lollipops? You've just had that property for 6 months, and you've made around probably $14,000 a month cash in your pocket for 6 months. How much is that?
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. If things don't work out in the end where you can't find someone to, how much is it?
Just 168.
Just $168,000. No, in 6 months, not a year. So 80,000, 84,000. Do you see my point? If everything's not sunshine and lollipops, you just made 84,000. I'm going to go do it again to someone down the street until practice makes perfect. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I really failed on this one. I just failed. I don't know why. I only made 84 grand in 6 months. You should be asking the question how you can fail more. You know what I'm saying, Roger? So if it's not all sunshine and lollipops, who cares, right? Okay. Okay, now, right.
That's assuming you're doing all the management yourself and not using a management company, correct?
That's assuming you're doing the management yourself. But when you're bringing in $24,000 a month, I say you start a management company, maybe get licensed in that state or have somebody with a license in that state that can represent you, and get for 400 units, it's about 8 employees, 4 management, 4 maintenance. If you have 100 units, it's 1 manager, 1 maintenance person. 50 units, it's one or the other. You get my point, right? For that amount of money, you're leveraging, right? Good question, though. Do you guys see this or no? I see people that are excited, and I see people that are not so, maybe a little cloudy. Anybody not see that? I want to make sure this is crystal clear.
Just to follow
if you could just hit that mic for me.
Just to follow on his point, it works good on, it seems to work, the number seems to work good on a larger scale unit, but anything under 10, would that make sense?
Well, you're not going to make the 14 grand a month. Okay? Right? But you know what? You might make 500 a month. Okay? You might make 500. Charles, would 500 bucks a month help out? Yeah. So it's all economies of scale there. I would be utilizing that right now if I had no money. Okay? Okay. So let me move. Yes?
Theoretically, it all sounds good, but wouldn't most of these...
But wait a minute. I see you guys now butting me to death. Sunshine and whatever. Yes, but you can butt me to death. Yeah.
Wouldn't your 6 months be probably too short, the time period, because if people have either leases in place...
That's what I said. I said we're going to have some leases that extend beyond that 6 month period. You'll have to take that into consideration. Absolutely. Absolutely. I want you to get the overall theory. You're coming at me with a couple butts now. And normally that's good if I'm dancing or something, but here I want you to really consider the overall theory here. All of these details you're going to have to look at. Don't slow yourself down with all these little things. You've got to look at the numbers. All this stuff has to be looked at. I want you to learn the theory though, okay? It's not for the details, it's for the overall theory. If I had no money, there's 2 out of the 3 techniques that you can use today. Today. So that guy right there that wants to sell the 6 unit, he doesn't want to hold paper, but maybe he would take a longer due diligence period while setting this up. You get control. Send the payments through a servicing company, just like Steve is on Charter Palms. Just like Steve is. Okay? That's really for Steve's benefit and the person he's buying it from. Same thing with this scenario. Your benefit and the seller. Okay? Term based on market appreciation. With that example I just gave you, that's forced appreciation. You're going to have a sublease situation. So that master lease is going to say that you have the right to sublease those 400 units out, or in your case, the 6 units out over that time period. You will be responsible, just like you get to keep the income, you're going to be responsible for the expenses and any repairs during that time period. That's a benefit to the seller. That doesn't come from him anymore. You're responsible for that. So that's another benefit that you want to sell the seller on. Make sense? Okay. Now, this is what we're really going to focus on tomorrow. This is one of my favorite techniques. I think y'all, I don't know why I keep saying that. I think you all need to be looking at this in every market that you're in. Subject to. This is another way that we can fish upstream. I'm going to be going through this more in detail tomorrow, but I want to kind of give you a taste of what this is tonight. Subject to. Buyer takes title to mortgaged property but is not personally liable for the amount due. And maybe corporately liable is probably something that I should add up there as well. So this is a little bit different of a technique. This would be used for people that have a little bit of money but maybe can't get financed, or they see leverage in not getting financed through a traditional bank. For instance, Steve saw leverage in that deal because he had to put down 12% on a, whatever that was, closing $3.2 million deal. So he had to put down about 12%. This is a perfect scenario for that, because in today's world, on that property, by the way, if Steve would have taken that to a commercial mortgage broker or to a lender, a bank locally here, he probably would have had to come up with 30%. At 30% cash, it does not work. It does not work. So and I think the seller knew that, by the way. The seller typically knows those terms. So the idea of a subject to means that you still put your due diligence in. Overall, what is happening here is you're going to be responsible for the property because you have ownership. The seller is going to be still tied to the debt. You're taking the property subject to the debt that's already in place. Steve did something similar to this on Charter Palms, but it was called a wraparound mortgage, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. But a subject to is there's no second mortgage in place, typically. You're going to go in and specifically take ownership to the property and take over the mortgage. Not assume the mortgage, but you're going to take the mortgage subject to the terms that are already in place. A lot of people get this confused with a mortgage assumption. A mortgage assumption, you have that loan in your entity or personal name. With a subject to, the loan stays in the name of the seller or entity of the seller. Does that make sense? Questions on that? Okay. I would recommend anytime you do a subject to use a trust. Did we have an attorney here today as a team member? No. That will come tomorrow then. The attorney that's coming tomorrow will talk about trusts a little bit. But there's a specific reason why I think a trust is ultimately the entity that you want to put this in. Maybe even down the road with Charter Palms, Steve should put that in a trust ultimately down the road. But we'll talk about that maybe later. Why a trust? Well, a trust is an entity just like a triple LP, limited liability, limited partnership, or a limited liability company, or a C corporation, any of those. Entity just like that. But what's different about a trust is, so a trust has, you know, asset protection and it's got tax advantages, but what's different about a trust is one thing, and that one thing is anonymity. There I go again, using those big words. Anonymity, meaning you put things in a trust when you don't want people to know who owns them. With an LLC, you can look up at the county who owns the LLC. With a trust, you can't find out that information. So specifically, what I am saying that is for something that I'm going to talk about more with subject to tomorrow. I don't want to kind of blow that bit of information. So I'm going to talk about why we're putting it in a trust in more detail tomorrow. Is that okay? That I hold that off till tomorrow? Benefits to buyer. Why would a buyer want to do a subject to? Number one, there's no loan involved, or no new loan involved. So there's no points to a new loan. There's no turning in your financial documents. There's no getting all your tax returns and all of those things together. You don't have to do that at all. It's a quick sale. So you can close on this rather quickly. Again, you want to know what the buyer's doing. You want to know why the buyer's selling. What does the buyer need? Does he want to retire? Is there sickness, death, or they need the money for their kids' college fund, or there's a divorce, or something? Why do they need the money, and how much do they need? Once I get that information, then I'm going to my archives of all my strategic, creative technique, and that one would work. Let's get more specific with these. Benefits to the seller. Number one, it could avoid foreclosure. Because if the loan is in place, and this could be with a single-family house, by the way, and this is what I mean by fishing upstream. This is what I would do. If I was in a market in which I knew the value of the home I was looking at, and it might be even below what the mortgage is by a little bit, but I know the rental market, because guys, the rental market and sales markets, they act differently. The sales market could be struggling, but the rental market could be thriving. And I know in this house, even though I'm a little bit upside down, I can rent it out in such a way that I get $250 a month cash flow. Okay? Everybody remember the plan? What's your number? 20 units at X amount. You know, you got all that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that seller, and I'm going to find out that seller by being proactive. How would I know if a seller is facing foreclosure while being in Canada? Anybody? Okay, the county, number one. I'm going to go to the county and I'm going to maybe do a search, or I'm going to have somebody locally do that. Did you know there's companies that will actually do searches? But you've got to know what you're searching for. What do you search for? NOD. Right, who said that? Right on. Right on. An NOD, Notice of Default. Why is the NOD so important? Well, the NOD is important because, number one, it's public notice. Number two, it's the notice that the owner of that house gets that says, hey, you're 3 or 4 months behind on your mortgage. This is the notice of default that we have to send out by law. Not only do we send it to you, but we send it to the county, and that gets recorded because why? Anybody know? That's right, it starts the clock. That's the very thing that starts the clock. So if you go to a service, by the way, there's services out there that will send you by email all of the NODs that have been recorded in the county that you are focusing on. Did you know that? You'll pay a fee for it. 30 bucks a month, 40 bucks a month, whatever it is. They'll even separate out by zip code. They'll send you all the NODs in a specific zip code. So what am I going to do? Subscribe. Well, I'm going to subscribe. Very good, right? But what am I going to do with that information? I got some work to do with you guys, I think. What am I going to do with that information? What is it? Contact the owners. I'm going to send a letter immediately, a letter. And the letter is going to be, can you imagine though, put your mind, remember I said trade with the owner or the renter? This is an area that you want to do that. Man, are my eyes shitty. I take the glasses off and you guys all look like one fuzzy thing. I've never cussed from stage so much as when I started working with Steve. I haven't, I don't know why. I think I just said shitty and I've never said that on stage. Anyway. I'm going to send a letter, but can you imagine in the mind of a seller that can't pay their mortgage, they're getting all kinds of mail. So how do you make your mail different? Pink envelope? Is that what you said? Pink envelope? Okay, right. How about have it look like my letter is going to be in a what? In an envelope with a thank you card or a birthday card or something like that. I don't want it to be a business envelope. I want it to be something they're going to open. They're going to open a card that looks like a birthday card because they think there could be a check in it. Greedy bastards. No, I'm just kidding. Right? I'm serious. If you don't think I'm serious with this, because they get mail and they don't want to open that mail that looks like a bill or a notice of, they already know they're in default. They don't want to be reminded of that. But if you could send them something that says, you can help them get out of their financial situation immediately. That goes a long way. It's getting to them and having them open that. It makes all the difference in the world. Somebody might say, well, John, would you send somebody there? Maybe. If you're that aggressive, I wouldn't do this in some states. Texas being one of them. Arizona being another one. Indiana being another. Some states are very gun friendly. I mean, really gun friendly, right? And so I would just make sure that you're diligent in thinking about that. But I would have somebody possibly knock on the door. Send them, if you think it's something worthwhile, send them a gift certificate. Send them a birthday or a letter that looks like it's in a birthday card envelope. You know, those envelopes look more square than they do rectangle, and it's not a window. Don't put a window envelope with your address in there. Don't use that, right? Because it's not going to get opened. Have you walked in foreclosed homes? You all have. You've seen the REOs. Do you see all the mail on the kitchen counters? Where do you think that's from? The banks, the medical bill. Because if they're not paying their mortgage, they're not paying their HOA. They're not paying their HOA. They're not paying their cable bill, perhaps. You see my point? So you got to separate yourself. That's the first thing. So I'm going to send them a notice saying, listen, I can solve your issue. Remember, when somebody's got a problem, a property for sale, they got a problem to solve. In this case, when you're in default, what overtakes the owner? Debt, yes. Thank you, Peter. Debt. Fear and desperation and isolation and what is it? What do you say? Alcohol? Yes. And one more. Embarrassment, anxiety, all of these things. You've got to be delicate in how you handle that buyer. Either have somebody on the ground there, like somebody if you're in Canada and you're working Phoenix, somebody in Phoenix, Charles, Martin, Dallas, somebody there, so they can delicately handle that. Hey, listen, I can save your credit. Here's what I'd like to do. I can get you out of this pre-foreclosure situation. I'll get you caught up on your loan. I know you've hit some tough times. I'm going to take your property subject to the debt that's already in place. I'll take ownership on it, but I need you to move out. You're going to sell me the home, and I'll absorb the debt. Now tomorrow, I'm going to go through subject to a little bit more detail because during the foreclosure scams, they took a great technique and they did 3 things with this technique that they scam people on. I want you to be aware of what they are so that you can actually talk about that, put that in your contract, and have your attorney address that as well. because there's a way that you can do this that you avoid all those things. It's a great technique to save someone's credit, get them in a better position, and put you in a scenario where you can get a house, rent it out for cash flow, or rent it out while that market improves, okay? Great technique here, subject to. It's a technique that you can use when you have very little money. I wouldn't say no money, but very little money, because you're going to need to get this homeowner caught up on their mortgage. And I do not want you to let that homeowner stay in the home. There's a reason for that, and I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. You've relieved them of that monthly payment too. And that's part of your sales or marketing. I'm going to solve your issue, I'm going to get you caught up, and you know what? You're not going to have that monthly payment anymore. I'll absorb that. I'm going to need you to move. They're probably going to want to move anyway. They're going to probably want to move anyway. We'll talk about that more in detail tomorrow. And it'll improve their credit score, so it won't totally ruin them. If they want to downsize, get into a smaller house, this technique might just save their credit so they can do that. Still get a loan to do that. You're a problem solver out there, not just a real estate investor. So as a problem solver, we're fishing upstream. We're way upstream in a subject to deal, way upstream prior to the foreclosure auction, prior to this becoming an REO. This is why this strategy works today. Now, you might say, well, John, where should I use this strategy? Well, I think you need to take a look at the loan, how much that mortgage is on it, and how much the house is worth. You certainly have to do that analysis. I think this technique is very valuable in markets in which the market during the boom didn't go sky high, but they still had some fallout. Atlanta is a great city to use this technique, because the problem in Atlanta is more so the economy, not the fact that the real estate exploded and then burst, like in Florida, Vegas, and Phoenix. You could use this in Florida, Phoenix, and Vegas, but I think this would be probably more appropriate in, say, 2013. Why? Because the underwater mortgages are going to, the underwater home values are going to probably get closer to that mortgage amount. And that would make more sense to do a subject to in those areas. Does this make sense? So if you have a little bit of money, I like to use this technique more so in emerging markets right now. And in 2013, really start to use this in sexy markets, because I think those underwater mortgages are going to catch up to, or actually the home value is going to catch up to the mortgage amount. Does everybody see that? So that's a technique, when you use it and why you should use it, okay? We're all good? Good. You guys like this stuff? Okay. All of these things.
That's going to trigger a due on sale, though.
Yes, we are going to talk about this due on sale clause tomorrow. I'm going to show you specifically how to protect yourself from a due on sale clause. Dallas.
Is this good with multis? I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is based on singles and condos and stuff. I mean, ultimately...
Yeah, you could do this with multis, but I think the majority of the use for everybody in this room is for single-family houses, for condominiums. You could use it on multis, sure, but the majority of the use is going to be for singles. Okay? Just want you to be aware of that. All right. With knowledge. You guys are very dangerous when you walk out of this door now. Now, of all the, what did I cover, 4? Of those 4 right now, I think we could probably implement the majority of those on the houses and properties we saw yesterday. But I want you to be armed with more weapons. Literally, when we're done, you will be walking like that. And when you see somebody else walking like that, you know that they either are in the Steve Martell class and group, or they've got a virus, or they've just shit their pants. One of those 3.